The first question I have is, how did you become a stage manager? What made you decide to become a stage manager? And I sort of contacted them about this beforehand and said, could you please come up with a 3-minute answer? Because to properly find this out would take our entire 30 minutes. So even though this is not time to do justice to the question, I would love to know, briefly, but colorfully and vividly, how it was that you made that decision, how this path took place.
Should I start?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm gonna start. So I was in high school and I had auditioned for Arcadia and I wasn't cast in it. And frankly, I didn't understand it, so that was okay. But I had a pet desert tortoise. I lived in California. So by virtue of having a tortoise, I was asked to be the stage manager. And I said, sure. And I did it, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then I just found ways to be helpful, I guess. And then when I was in college at San Francisco State, I started working on drag shows as a stage manager. And I have to tell you, that is a great way to learn how to be a stage manager. So I just kind of found my way in that way and did it a bit in school. And then went to grad school for it and figured out how new plays work and big musicals and that sort of thing. So
Super quickly, what is it about drag shows that makes it such a good entry into it?
there's always an adventure, like always, going on backstage. You learn little tricks to get people to run on time and not on drag time. For example, it was before everybody had cell phones a while ago, and I used to set the clocks ahead so they didn't know what time it was. You're operating on my time, so like little tricks like that to kind of make the thing go, so it was good. And I just kept finding ways. I remember finding ways to be helpful, and people would be like, oh, we really need this thing, and I'd say, oh, I can do that. Like that's what I'm here for. And then through school and through professional experience with Matthew, I learned a great deal about what it meant to be a stage manager in the process of new plays, especially, but also musicals. So, yeah.
Same, basically, minus the tortoise and the drag shows. I did this in high school as well. I actually wanted to go into television and be a TV producer. But, friends of mine said, come do the high school shows as a stage manager. Didn't know what I was going to do. Just wanted to be helpful. And so I did it. I fell in love with it. I went into the city for college and really just started working as well. I would PA at MTC over the summer while I was in college. And roundabout, and just built my connections through that, and just really started working throughout my career. Yeah.
What was it you fell in love with in high school?
Live theater was just so much fun, actually. I found it as real art, really right off the bat. It was really, just to be part of a live production was really, really interesting, rather than TV. So it changed my path, and for the better.
Thank you. Chad.
I feel like after Amanda's, I have to punch mine up. I'm a desert tortoise. I also, high school started out, I think, in acting, like most, and I was really crap at memorizing lines, which is fair. And this amazing high school drama teacher, David Bernheim, said, I think you'd be really great as a stage manager. So we did this huge musical every year. And I came in on The Mystery of Edwin Drood my sophomore year. I loved it, fell in love with it, and did it through the rest of high school. And then into college, I wanted to do it, but I also wanted to double major. I like to write, and specifically poetry. So I think really under that, like working poet, probably stage management is like on par with like financial. So it got to like a point where the classes were competing with other classes. So I decided just stage management. So I got a BFA in school. From there, went to Actors Theater of Louisville. Really fell in love with it even more. And new work is sort of what I've done. I have a few Christmas carols in the closet, but for the most part, it's new work. So that's what I fell in love with, and that brought me in. It's funny, in interviews, a lot of times you get asked this question, which I thought was so funny when you said, we're going to ask this question. And I think for a long time, my pat answer to it was, my parents operate on this thing called, my sister and I call Turner Time, which is like if you're supposed to be somewhere at 11, around 11:15, they start to like get stuff together. Around 11:30, we're like in the car. Like 11:45, we're calling my grandparents to say like, oh, we're running late, which they already know. So I think like that was actually probably even way before falling in love with it. This idea of like managing time correctly was something that was like in my blood. So.
Were you raised by drag queens?
This is going to be online, so this is weird. My father's a retired Methodist minister, so it's sort of similar. Yeah.
And new work, you said particularly.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I just finished this revival. I love plays that have been done before, but like I really love the process of like creating new work and being involved in the creation of new work, and helping like, because it really is like, I mean, we'll maybe speak to this, but like this amazing collaboration with everybody in the room to create this new thing, and that energy and excitement of that, and yeah, really just every time, every
And
show.
It's really good to be around playwrights, right? Like,
Yeah,
cherry on the top of the whole thing.
No, I mean, again, I love it, and maybe the sucker for it, but yeah, I mean, it's hard work, like anything is hard work. That is a great thing that you create in the arts in particular, but yeah.
Excellent. Now, my second question is, which in a weird way wants to be my third question, but I'm going to make it my second one. What is if you could talk about what your favorite part of the process is and why, and by process I'm breaking it down into pre-rehearsal prep, rehearsal itself, tech, and calling the show, the run of the show afterward. Which of those segments do you like the most, and why?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I love them all, but I really love rehearsal because it's the point for me where you're just starting to all figure it out together. You're taking words off a page and really bringing it to life, and you're working on it with set designer and costume designer, and everybody's working on it together right at the initial stage, and that's really pretty exciting for me.
Chuck.
Yeah, we probably all have the same answer. I love it all as well. I think tech, if I can choose two, because tech is where you get to own the show. You really like you sort of form ownership of it because you really are like helping create it. Like I have taken over many shows. It's not the same thing because like whoever teched it really owns the show, like in that sort of sense of like you're sort of like the bricklayer in many ways. But I love the day-to-day, the like running of the show, because it's such a temporal thing, and like every night is this new creation again that you're a part of, and so that's the fascinating thing to me, to watch it change, to watch it grow. Again, I think like with every show, when you get to 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in, if you are on a long run, 6 months in, you really see the trajectory of it and how much it's grown and how the actors have deepened and how you've like found this new way of calling this thing that the lights happen right at this exact moment that nobody in the audience sees or knows, but and the actors on stage maybe know. That to me is the exciting part of it. I mean, it's all exciting,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the performance.
Amanda.
For me, it's tech.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that because we just watched a show about tech. No, I really love tech because you have all of these wonderfully talented people that are working in this business because they're passionate about it, and they've been thinking about whatever play you're doing, and they've been chewing on it in their minds, and throwing all kinds of ideas against the wall, and the rehearsal process is great. I love all of it, but tech, you get all of that energy in one room together. And it's really where, the magic, I'm gonna say it's where the magic happens. So I think it's exciting, and I also love prep. Was that one of the options?
Yeah.
Prep? Yeah. I love prep because you do yourself favors as a stage manager during prep, and you take care of things that you get them out of the way in prep so that you, during the rehearsal process, can leave yourself more available to things that are coming your way.
What's an example of a favor you would do yourself in prep?
just making like really nice paperwork or thinking, being through.
Nice paperwork.
No, it's such a dorky thing, right?
It really is.
He's like, yeah, the fonts and all this sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a nice
Agonizing hours as a font.
Century Gothic. But you just end up doing yourself favors. Like you just put thought into things and you say, like rehearsing this show, for example, like trying to figure out how to create an environment that it would make sense to the cast as we were staging it, because they're speaking to speakers in the house, So it's like, what are they looking at? So just like putting signs on the rehearsal wall that says the costume designer's here, the stage manager's here. And that was especially exciting on this show, figuring out how to cue them when there's a headset conversation going on and they have a line after the headset conversation, but they're not wearing a headset. Like that sort of stuff is fun. And when you go into it with a game plan, that plan might change. But if you go into it with a game plan, you've at least like laid some groundwork for it. And then there's more room to be engaged and more room for discovery and rehearsal for your process, but the process as a whole. So I have 2 answers. It's tech and prep.
All right. This is like a bad confession, but you might guess it. When I started the process of this play and researching this play, I for all that I had been around stage managers for years, I had a prejudice, which I think is a common one in the population. So I am going to confess to it, which is that I sort of thought like, in the theater everyone is crazy and motivated by crazy forces and for crazy reasons. And the stage manager, just very luckily, is this very different kind of person who we have all sort of enticed into a symbiotic relationship, but it's, this is an organized person who does things for very sane reasons and in very practical ways, and you sort of think of the prejudices of, the grumpy stage manager who likes bossing people around. And that's why they're doing it, so they sort of enjoy the control and the thing of it. And when I began speaking more intimately with stage managers, what I discovered is that the word passion kept coming up as much as it does when you were talking with anyone else in the theater. And this whole discussion of, being motivated by your passion and moving through your passion and what happens when your passion dies, which is the thing that everyone in theater contends with. We're all motivated deeply by passion, and there is a point, which does not happen to everyone, luckily, but you can see it happening to some people, where their passion dies, and they either continue to do it in a very different kind of way, or they leave the theater. So I wanted to ask you, the question was, what feeds your passion, and what drains it? What are the things which give you hope and make you get up and say, yes, I'm going to spend another day stage managing, and what makes you think, perhaps I will go and take see what my LSATs are, and go slink off?
I mean, I think what feeds my passion is that every project and every day really is an adventure. I mean, it really is. Again, on this show, there's so much we're doing in this show that I've never personally seen done before or executed, and especially with the subject matter. So every day was an adventure, trying to figure out, again, like how do you cue somebody when there's a headset conversation going on? Or like even how do you engage in a conversation when you're firing recorded cues of somebody else speaking, like finding the pacing of that. So to me, just the fact that you get to go on a different adventure every day is pretty cool. And the thing that drains it for me is I'm always really sad when people are having a hard time, and it may not have anything to do with what's going on in the room or the process, but there's something that's weighing them down personally, and it's affecting their experience in the community that we've created in the project that we're working on, and that makes me really sad. I don't know that it drains my passion per se, but that's where I feel the weight of what we do, because you get so close with everybody in a creative process. So that weighs on me. It doesn't drain me, but it weighs on me. Yeah.
You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I love telling a good story, and that's what drives me. I do see all of us who do this as storytellers, and so, to get up and go to work and tell a story for a group of people sitting out in that dark is really exciting every day. What drains is just sometimes how much you're always on call,
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, days off, your phone rings and it's an actor or a director or somebody always needing something from you. You know, you get texts at 10:30 at night trying to deal with things, or, you know, and it's sometimes life things and it's sometimes, and so your life, your personal life has to stop
Mm-hmm.
at various points. And so that's draining a little bit. As more and more of my life is, you know, coming into shape too, you know, it's a little, you know, I want my time.
Yeah, and the stage manager is there, what, 3 hours before, 2 hours before?
Yeah, yeah.
3 hours
And then-
after, 2 hours after.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
then to deal with it on the day off sometimes is, you know, just give me one day, one 24-hour chunk of time, just please.
Mondays, Matthew.
No, they still
You
call.
always return texts on Mondays.
Oh,
so-
yeah. Oh, of course. It's,
Mhm.
I sleep with my cell phone next to my head. It is true.
All emails in about an hour, regardless of
Yeah.
the day or night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chuck?
Yeah, I'll start with the drains. No, I mean, just to end on like a hopeful, but I'm with Matthew actually on the drains. I was going to say a lot of other things, but because this is going to be online, I'm not going to say those things. I think depending on, actually I will say one thing. I think depending on the project of it, you, as a stage manager, I just did this Broadway show, and you really are like in the bullseye of everything. And that's like the calls, the emails, the constant, like you are like really the center person in a weird way. And especially at the sort of larger commercial level, because there's like, for example, this show, $5 million on the show, and so you really, for, not because you wanted to be, like you're all of a sudden in the middle of this thing. So that's sometimes draining because you're spending a lot of time taking care of a lot of people that aren't really the thing that you want to be doing, you know. So there's that, and that to Matthew's point. Takes up so much of your time. I mean, it really is sort of like from when you wake up in the morning, after the 7 o'clock call, before you're actually awake, to like midnight when you're still at the theater dealing with something, and then you have to go home for an hour and work on the thing. But to the passion side of it, I just did this random thing for Lincoln Center where they had teaching artists go into schools and work with high school students where they created these songs. And they basically were given a picture, they created a song about the picture and had a composer and a lyricist help them write these songs. And then last Monday, they performed these songs. And the students, like on their faces as these like professional actors and musicians, played these songs that they ultimately wrote or had a large hand in writing. That energy and that energy from an audience is like what excites me. That is the passion behind it. To know that, and it's hard, and you have to look for it, and I think that's how a lot of people lose their passion because you stop finding it. You have to look for that constantly. I think this idea that like you are doing something, you are a part of something that is bigger than you, and you are doing something that is important to the world, even in a small scale. And that world meaning like 99 seats or 1,000 seats or whatever that is. Or 6 students who wrote these songs. To me, that's the passion of it, is the excitement that people feel, the excitement that the audience has as they're leaving the space. That's like what we're all like doing it for, because it is silly. We work way too much. We get paid almost nothing. You know, it's like if you like put it on paper, somebody would be like, "You're an insane person." Like, you know, I mean, not just stage managers, actors, designers, everybody that are in this community actually. General manager, I mean, from the top to the bottom. So I think that is like what drives all of us. Right? This idea that we're a part of this bigger thing, temporal as it is, that has this affects someone.
We have 10 more minutes. I have more questions, but I just wanted to check in and see, does anyone have questions that they'd like to ask? Okay, I would proceed.
I have one. I do have one.
Yeah.
I was wondering what the like longest run of a show you've been on that you've been calling, and then like how you keep that interesting. Like when you get like really deep. I don't know if you've been on a show that was running 6 months and like I don't know how you keep that exciting and I don't know, or maybe it just inherently is exciting.
No,
I'm
that's
just assuming.
I
for me, like most recently, was doing Octoroon a second time. So I did Octoroon once here, and then I did Octoroon at Tofana, which they were different productions, but there was a lot of similarities. And in fact, when I went to go call it, I just opened, like when we were teching, I opened my book from here and just moved, stuff around. But I got off book for it, which was fun. I was like, ooh, this is exciting, because a lot of it was already in my body. And for shows like that, where there's stuff going on, like this one, you can't really be looking at your book. Like, you have to get your face out of the book, right? So my adventure on that one was learning what the page turns were and like where all the cues were. So if something went haywire, I could, refer to the script if I needed to. I think at that point I was off book with their lines as well, but it was just like, do-do-do-do-do, and I was like, this is so fun. And I remember when the videographer came to film it for the archival purposes, he's like, well, we're gonna have to look in your book and see what light cue this is, and this one, so I can check the levels on it. And I was like, that's 124, 371, 562. And he was like, wow. And I'm like, right? So that's, for me, because I do a lot of like off-Broadway runs that are sometimes open, sometimes limited runs. But that's my most recent experience. It sort of went over the period of a year, and that kept it interesting.
The longest run I did was the original Broadway production of Light in the Piazza, and that was 1.5 years of my life, and it was the most amazing time of my life, actually. We became a family in 1.5 years, and that's what kept it going. And I was in the ASM on it, but I also got to call it, and so we would rotate. So it always, between the deck and calling, it was always fresh, and new people come into the show, and that makes it fresh as well. And then we filmed it for Lincoln Center, and that was exciting. And then we filmed it for Live from Lincoln Center, and then we were on the Tonys, and so it just always, kept on going. And it was such a new show at the time as well. It had a lot of vibe to it. And at Lincoln Center, they are limited runs, but it kept extending. And, it never was an open-ended run. It just kept extending. So that was always, whenever they would call a company meeting and tell us that, we were extending for another 4 months, it was always, a treat for us to be working. And it was just, it was a special show for all of us. And so that was, it actually just, it's been 10 years, actually, since we performed it.
Wow.
And, yeah, and I'm still friends with that whole company to this day. So it's very special.
Yeah, I think for me, I did the show called Golda's Balcony, which I did off Broadway and then moved to Broadway, and then we ran on Broadway for 19 months, so a little more than 1.5 years. And then it was in LA, San Francisco, and then a tour kicked off in Florida, and I did all of those things. So the Broadway run of 1.5 years, I was the same way. I would not flip the page for 18 pages and then be like, oh shit, where page are we on? Because it just it gets like a muscle memory. And it was different because it was a one-woman show starring the amazing Tilda Feldshuh. And it wasn't a company of people that changed because there wasn't an understudy, but it was her, and so it was different every night. And I feel this way about stage management, I'm sure we all do as well, is that you, and Anne Bogart really drilled this into me, is that you are the other person on stage. So if it's a cast of 9, you're the 10th. Yeah, and it really is this weird dance, and especially when one-woman shows, one-man shows, you really are waltzing with this other person. So that was an amazing experience. And then to have it sort of be over the course of 5 years, that's the longest I've worked on something like that. But yeah, it's sort of, you have to, the focus of it becomes very different than a normal run, because at the 18-month mark, when you can call half the show without really turning the pages, you really have to pay attention, because your mind just is you're just not even aware that you're calling it almost. But yeah, but they're great. Those sort of runs. Yeah, because you really see the show really transform in that sort of length of time. Yeah.
Does anyone? Yeah.
I have a question. Are there distinct differences
differences for you between working on Broadway, working off Broadway, working regionally, working in opera?
Money. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, what I was saying about the sort of the Broadway level of it, you at on the off-Broadway level, I on the Broadway level too, answer to the general managers, the company manager, production manager. We're all sort of this weird trinity that answer to the general managers, and on Broadway, you answer to the general manager and then a pool of producers on things. So that can be 3, that can be 25. So like that becomes like, I think the responsibilities sort of become like who your like sort of target, for lack of a better word, becomes a larger area of things. But yeah, money is the larger sort of thing, and resources I think too.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like you know.
I'm not going to view my position differently just because I'm doing something for 99 seats versus 1,800 seats.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
still
it's-
going to come with the passion of it and really treat it with the same respect as it would, just because it's because that's what we own.
Yeah, and the unions play a larger deal into it too. I mean, even at some of the off-Broadway theater companies that are union houses, you are dealing with a different set of rules than you're dealing with at other off-Broadway houses. So it's just something else to factor into what you're doing.
I mean, like here on this show, I'm pressing all the buttons.
Oh.
I wouldn't get to do that on Broadway unless it was like a special circumstances, but it's fun.
Better exercise too, I should.
Yeah, I'm burning calories. That's great. Yeah, that's good.
Does anyone else have a question? Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the sense of legacy with stage managers, like who, people who came before you, the ones who come after you, building a life that as that. And so, like, because, as directors, we have I assisted this person, I was inspired by this person, that sort of thing. For stage managers, who inspires you?
When I left, I graduated from grad school, but when I left it, I started working with him. I think it was my first job after grad school, and I was his assistant. And I was telling Ann this earlier, we were thick as thieves from the second we started speaking to each other. I don't think in our interview we talked about the show at all.
2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes maybe, and then we spend another hour and a half just snuggling. And to leave school, you have so many like academic ideas in your head. And then I, was really blessed to get to work with Matthew. And I have to say that like watching him, because he sat in the back with another friend of ours, Christine. Hi, Christine. He sat in the back, and it was fun watching him watch this show. Because I learned a lot from him, if not everything. I'm admitting that on camera.
Well, can you admit the show you did?
Happy Now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
The D word? Demote.
Oh yeah. So it was my thesis at Yale. Was Happy Now, and the company that was doing it was a little like, oh, I don't want you to be the PSM on it because you just graduated from school. So it was this unique situation where I was being demoted, as he likes to remind me every day of my life. When I was being demoted to ASM, it was an interesting process, and that could be weird, but it wasn't weird at all.
No,
I don't
not at
think.
all.
It was actually kind of cool to be
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm now seeing the show from the other side, and getting to know it in a different way. So, there are certainly like trends and habits that people have, and inspiring stories. And when I go see a show and it's called Beautifully, I'm like, yeah, and that inspires me. But just being in the trenches with Matthew, and also with the ASM on this show, Rachel, and with Christine, who we work with all the time, like that's the inspiration to me. Because you truly are in the trenches. I see Rachel more than I see anybody. And it's nice. I like it. Except for my husband. I wish I'd see him more. But, yeah.
Stop answering your emails in bed.
Hi, Mom.
I'm actually, because we're at time,
Mhm.
I'm gonna roll over your answers
That's
to this
fine.
question, unless you have a sort of one signal or stage manager you wanna.
No, well, Deb
All that.
Bell was my mentor at Actors Theater of Louisville,
Yeah.
and she's at Emerson teaching now. And I was just gonna to add to what Amanda said, and I'm sure Matthew echoes this as well. I think you steal a little and take a little from everybody you work with, assistants,
Mhm.
like everything, you know, and each situation just increases your like
Yeah.
your sort of portfolio as well of like ideas and things like that. So
Yeah.
Coping
Yeah.
strategies and mechanisms.
Absolutely,
And
right.
thing.
Yeah.
right.
I know I had a great discussion with one of the two of you, I can't remember which, about paperwork and like getting great paperwork ideas from other people. And I just have one last question, which is, I know that stage managers are in general, or I have the sense that stage managers are in general fairly bitter about their portrayal in the media.
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of crabbiness about Smash, there was a lot of crabbiness
Yes.
about Birdman. Are there any portrayals in the media of stage managers that you want to recommend as really, really describing the thing accurately?
Kermit the Frog. Yeah.
And the birdcage.
And the birdcage, yeah. He was an excellent stage manager in the birdcage, or burlesque even.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. I remember realizing, I think I was doing summer stock and we were all sort of hanging out and celebrating summer stock. And so we were watching a Muppet movie and it all sort of dawned on us at the same time that Kermit the Frog is the stage manager of the Muppets. And I was like, yeah. And he doesn't make smoothies like Linda on Smash, you know. Although I have made smoothies, so it wasn't that far of a stretch. But yeah, I don't know. Can you guys think of one that's
Well-
not a Muppet?
No, but each of those portrayals, positive or negative, always do have some, you know, element of
Mhm.
truth to us all.
Yeah.
I just don't like it when it's, you know, the rigid, you know, buzzkill
Yeah.
that we're all
Yeah.
known to be, or we're thought of.
Yeah.
Well, I remember speaking with you, Ann. It's like one of the first things I said before you even asked questions. I was like, I have one request. I don't want to sit in the theater and see the stage manager walk out with like a stopwatch around his or her neck with like, yeah, this like, it's half hour or something. Like, you know, as a, like my father as a minister, it's like watching those like bumbling old man like portrayals of what it means to be like, it's just like, there is an idea, and fair enough, there are those people who do fit that bill 100%.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's like, thankfully, you know, not always that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and then for the awesome and extraordinary work that you do in general.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for like
Thank you.
portraying it
Yeah.
and supporting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even begin to do it justice. I just attempted.
No, it's amazing. I have to say this. You all saw the show. My mom always says, I know we're out of time, sorry, is that when my mom tries to explain to people what I do, she always says, you know, my son like makes the magic happen, which is like a lovely mom thing to say, but it's pretty freaking right about what I do. So like, fair enough. And I think like the amazing thing about watching this show is sitting there and like listening in on these conversations, which thank goodness and like really like truncated and compressed because it would be a really boring show otherwise. But like you're hearing something that the audiences never get to hear.
Yeah.
This idea of like how the magic is happening around you. I was like delighted in a way that at a theater experience I've never felt before. Like I feel like the audience will leave here having at least a better idea of what goes into the making of a show, the production of a show. So like, what a treat to see like both sides of it, both in the house, what's happening, but also this amazing thing that's happening on stage too. So, yeah.